Mary. We've had so many new members joining lately, and I'm so excited that you're all going to be a part of our little community here. I've been really behind putting up tutorials because my life has just been really overwhelming lately, but I wanted to get one up for you guys this week, and there's been a lot of questions lately about lenses and what's better for portraits versus a macro lens. Um, so that's what this is going to be focused on. For the best resolution, if you're having trouble seeing this video, there should be a little symbol in the lower right hand part of your screen that allows you to change the setting to HD. That's going to allow you to see the most amount of information on here. So if this looks a little blurry to you, I suggest checking on that and making sure that you have the best possible view of this video. Because this is just a quick time video. I'm not putting this on YouTube or anything. This is just for you guys. So basically yesterday I was shooting a wedding and I got there a little bit early because my husband was DJing, so I had to. So what I did is I stole the rings and I went out and I did a bunch of different ring shots for you guys so that you could see the difference between macro lenses and long focal length lenses and what's better for detail shots like this versus portraits and whatnot. So this first image that we're looking at right here, this was shot with a 105 Sigma macro lens. What the macro part actually does is it's a magnification of the lens that allows me to get really, really close to what I'm shooting. So obviously, looking at this picture, this is not cropped in, this is straight out of camera. I was really close to this image, or to this subject here, which is the ring. And it's still focused for me. I didn't have trouble with autofocus. It focuses right in no matter how close I get. The thing is your depth of field is going to be really, really narrow. So you can look up here and see that I was actually shooting at f11, and even at f11, only right here in the ring is in focus. Everything else is a little soft, and then obviously the back is very soft, which might be okay if that's what you're looking for. I'm actually okay with this shot for the client, but it would have been nice to have a little bit more in focus, so I could have shot with a higher ISO and a higher f-stop to try to get more of this picture in focus. But the most important part is that this lens allowed me to get really, really close to the rings in order to get that detail shot and keep the most amount of resolution that I possibly could in this image. The next lens I pulled out was my 70-200, yes. This was shot at 200 millimeters, same f-stop, f11. If I zoom in to a 4:1 ratio, it is in focus. You can see that it's not quite, the depth of field is not quite as restrictive. There's more in focus than with the 105 millimeter because it's not a macro lens. For portraits, I use my 70-200 at 200 millimeters, which is what this was shot at, all the time. It has a very small amount of lens distortion, and it gives you a lot of nice lens compression, which I'm going to talk about in a little bit, so we won't go too much into detail with that right now. But as far as macro capabilities, not great. Like, if this was a detail shot that I want to give a bride and groom, I would have to crop in a lot, right? And it wouldn't be that great, where with a 105 macro, like, I feel like that's beautiful compared to a 200 millimeter non-macro lens. You just don't get the magnification that you can get with a macro lens. The next one I did was an 85 millimeter, same settings, and same problems as the 200. Really, is especially with the 85, is you just can't get close enough to the subject that you're shooting to get like a really close up detailed shot. Like, even if you put it in autofocus, you really can't focus in on this image or these rings without being about this far away. This was as close as I could get and get my lens to focus on what the subject was. Now I could crop this in, but you're gonna lose quality. It's not a horrible shot, you could use it. But again, not quite as desirable as a macro shot like this. The next lens I used was my 75 to 24, and it actually is a macro, so it let me get a lot closer. It does have that capability of the magnification. I don't know how sharp this is. Let's give Lightroom a moment. It's okay. It's not tack sharp, but it's okay. So this is actually, to me, a really pretty nice shot that I would consider giving a client. It's sharp throughout both rings, but you still have a nice little blur in the background. And part of that is because this is a macro lens as well as a great portrait lens. This is one of my favorite lenses that I use in the studio. And again, it's a Sigma 75 to, I believe it's 28 millimeters. It's a really inexpensive, versatile lens. If you are looking for something that's going to allow you to get really, really close to your subject for detail shots like this, or stay further away and get a nice portrait shot, this is a great lens for that. And then the last lens I pulled out was a really wide angle, 24 millimeter. It was actually 12 to 24. And why I didn't shoot it at 12, I can't tell you. I guess I was in a rush at the end and I just forgot. So this lens actually has pretty good macro capabilities. It's not technically a macro lens, but it can get a lot of really good magnification at 12 millimeters. And I'm going to show you that in a little bit. If I zoom in, give Lightroom a second to adjust, it's pretty sharp. The background has a kind of nice blur to it. It's not a bad image. I could crop it in a little bit and use it. I think if I had shot at 12, you would have seen a little bit better of a blur, a little bit more magnification here, but it's not bad. So I wanted to pull up a couple other images that I have shot using this lens, which is the 12 to 24 at 12, I believe. Let's see. This one's at 24. 24, they're both at 24. But so look at this image right here. This was shot at a baptism. And now the bokeh I'm getting in the background here, part of the reason it's so beautiful it was really far away. So I'm upstairs on a balcony. These lights are all downstairs. And here's another image where you can see a little bit more. So here's the opposite. Now I'm downstairs and these lights are all up on the rafters. So part of the reason that they're looking like beautiful and blurry and those beautiful little circular bokehs that you get is because there's a lot of distance between what I'm shooting and the background, just like right here. So my whole point of this is just to say that the 12 to 24 can be a really great macro lens as long as you have a decent amount of distance in the background between your subject in the background to give you that kind of pretty depth of field. This is also shot with the 12 to 24. It's shot at 14 millimeters, so this is really, really wide open. So this lens is great for shooting landscapes, interiors like this church, anything that you really want to get the whole picture, especially if you do real estate photography. This lens is kind of a must-have. Even a 24 to 70 really just doesn't give you enough room to see the whole area, where the 12 to 24 really does. This is a great lens. But what you can see here is because it's such a wide angle lens, if you look over here at like this exit sign, you can see it's distorted. Like it's kind of, like it doesn't look normal. It's like wrapped around the edge. These are kind of bowed out. That's what a really wide angle lens is going to do. So while it's great for some macro capabilities, it's great for landscapes, it's terrible for portraits. So here's a portrait done with this lens at 24 millimeters. I did not intend to take this picture. It's not even in focus, to be honest. I just grabbed it. It's a little soft. I don't think I gave this to the client. But it was one of those moments where I was photographing a detail at this baptism, and they were like, oh, look at my son. Isn't he so cute? And you feel obligated to take a picture real quick. So because I shot this with such a wide angle lens, he's distorted. Like, his head probably isn't this big up here. His jaw's probably not this small. He's probably a little bit more proportional. If I had given this to the client, they would have been like, huh, why does he look kind of weird? And it's because it was shot with such a wide angle that you're getting a lot of lens distortion. And even if you go down to this little thing here which says enable profile corrections, which fixes a lot of the lens distortion, it's not going to do it now because this is a JPEG, but it's still not going to be 100%. So when you think of what you want to use for a portrait lens, you want to think of a higher millimeter than like a 50. So anything less than a 50 is technically a wide angle lens. Anything higher than a 50 is a telephoto lens. A 50 or higher is really more desirable for portraits because it's not going to distort the proportions of your subject like this did. Here's a real quick comparison using the 70 to 200, and this is what I shoot almost all of my portraits with. This is a 70 to 200 lens. Obviously in my backyard that looks like a disaster. We look like, oh my goodness. Anyways, the kids are playing in the backyard. And this image is shot at 70 millimeters, so zoomed all the way out using this lens. And you can see, even if I cropped this in, and I don't want to be quite that close here. So even if I crop this in, the attention is on my subject, but I still have a lot of distraction going on here in the background. And this is shot at f4.5, so it's not like super wide open because I don't shoot wide open ever. But it's not a really huge f-stop either, so there should be some blur in the background. But if I really want to isolate my subject, shooting at 70 millimeters is not going to be as effective as shooting at 200 millimeters. So now I'm shooting at 200 millimeters. I'm still shooting at f4.5. I haven't changed that at all. All I've changed is the length of my lens. So now I'm at 200 millimeters. I have a larger focal length. I have more lens compression, and I'm separating my subject from the background a lot more. So when you're shooting portraits, you want to think about the lens compression of the length that you're shooting, which the macro 104 can be a great portrait lens. 104 is still, or 105 is still a great length to get some nice lens compression in the background, isolate your subject, and get a nice tack sharp photo. The 85 can be good too. It tends to not have as nice of a bokeh in the background or a blur in the background as like a 200 millimeter because it just doesn't have the same compression. Because an 85 is obviously a smaller focal length. But it's still a great portrait lens. The wider angle you get after that, the more you start getting into the 50 millimeter, 40 millimeter, that's when you start getting the lens distortion. It's not going to be a great portrait lens. So overall, what I hope, if any of this made sense, I know sometimes I ramble and it doesn't always make sense, is my point to get across here is that it doesn't really matter if you're using a macro lens or not when you're shooting portraits. What matters more is your lens length, and you are better off shooting a portrait with a lens length of greater than 50 millimeters. That's going to give you more isolation from your background. It's going to make your subject more of the focal point of your image. If you're shooting something like a landscape or a very very detailed shot, then it's great to have a macro or a very wide angle lens for those landscapes. But for portraits, anything wider than a 50 millimeter is really going to cause some distortion to your subject. They're going to look a little bit off. I don't know if any of this made sense. I hope it did. If you guys have any feedback for me, please feel free to post about it or email me or do whatever you got to do. And I will try my hardest to get back to you. I know it's not always possible. I'm moving into a new studio right now and life is a little crazy, but I do try my best to get back to you as much as possible and try to give you some feedback. So if you have any questions, feel free to message me and I will do my best. I hope you guys have an awesome weekend and I look forward to hearing from all of you.